This video is sponsored by Sea6, the best tech stack for modern biotech.
I'm Sailaja. I'm one of the co-founders of Sea6 Energy, and I'm also Chief Scientific Officer at Sea6. So, it's been more than 12 years since I started Sea6. From being just out of IIT Madras, I finished my dual degree in biotechnology at IIT Madras. And a couple of our classmates and one of the mentors, Mr. Srikumar Suranarayan, who was the ex-head of R&D at Biocon. So we got together to start this venture in 2010, primarily with the vision to create sustainable solutions. And we were looking for a renewable biomass feedstock which can actually address global world problems like food, feed, and energy. And if you look at most of the solutions that we have today in food and even energy, most of it is derived from plant matter. And even if you look at the fossil fuels that we are using today, most of it is derived from animal and plant matter, which is buried deep inside the earth for millions of years. So we felt, what if we could actually tap into plant matter, which can actually solve some of these critical problems. And especially in the Indian context, we import almost 85% of our crude oil. So we started with that big vision to, we want to change the landscape of biofuels in India. And we were looking for a suitable, renewable and sustainable biomass resource. And while we were in the pre-final years in IIT Madras, we were actually working on a problem statement of, macroalgae was the buzz at that point of time. There was a lot of funding which was going into macroalgae in 2008 to 10. And we really wanted to do the techno-economical evaluation of the technology and see if it is even commercially feasible. Because if we want to make an impact on biofuels, the scale is in millions of tons. And you need a similar scale of biomass to be available to even make a difference in the biofuel space. For us, then when we did a deep dive in the last year's project, we realized that microalgae, although it has very high oil content and it can be grown, it has several limitations in terms of growing it at scale. So the scale of the raw material was the main issue in microalgae, and we felt because of the high costs involved in growing it under controlled conditions, you have to pump in carbon dioxide, you have to put in artificial light, you have to give nutrients. It would actually involve a lot of cost for making the raw material. And also downstream processing is very difficult and tough. You have to process, the maximum growth cycle for a microalgae would be like 10 gram per liter. There are technologies which are actually increasing the productivity and yield as of the current date, but this was the stage about 10-12 years ago when we were working on the microalgae technology. So we realized that we have to process a lot of fresh water in order to, get to the final oil content. So we felt we need to move away from, fresh water and land-based biomass feedstock if we have to really make a difference in the biofuel space.
Right, because especially if you're competing with human food and human libraries.
Yeah, and especially in the Indian context, you have so much population to feed. You have limited resources. Land is not increasing on a daily basis. You have limited arable agricultural land, and you want to increase the productivity of the agricultural land to suit the requirements of the human population.
How are you solving this problem?
So we looked at the oceans. We said, why don't we go to the oceans and grow plants on the oceans? So that would circumvent the land problem. That would completely circumvent any freshwater requirements. So that looked like a very exciting idea for us. And we actually started looking for plants which can grow on the sea. And what we came up in our search was there are macroalgae which are being grown for many decades in several parts of the world, not just in Asia, but also in other parts of the world, like mainly in China, Indonesia, Philippines, and most Southeast Asian countries. There's a lot of history of cultivation of macroalgae. So these are like multicellular organisms which again harvest sunlight, convert it via photosynthesis into carbohydrates. So we felt this is a very exciting proposition for us, and we really pitched in to start the company in 2010 to look at how we can actually utilize the advantages that macroalgae has and grow it at a large scale, and how we can process it to, biofuels and any other products from macroalgae. Yeah.
So do they naturally grow in ocean, or are you growing this?
So there are 3 different kinds of macroalgae. There are brown, red, and green. So red macroalgae is grown vegetatively, and it does not require any inputs. You don't have to add fertilizers, or where we don't have to pump in carbon dioxide. The way it is actually put on the surface of the ocean, it needs to be held on the surface of the ocean for it to grow over a period of 45 days to 60 days. So it grows naturally by taking in all the inputs from the environment. And similarly, most of the brown seaweeds also grow naturally in the intertidal zones, and they need a substrate to attach, and they grow naturally. So these have been growing from decades, and especially if you look at the tropical red macroalgae species, they have been actually cultivated, they have been domesticated by a group of scientists, and they have been cultivated over the last 50 to 60 years, mainly in Southeast Asian countries. So we felt, something which is actually cultivable and has a history of agronomy, it seemed very exciting for us to actually focus and narrow down on that species. Yeah.
But out of curiosity, how do you even collect all this raw material? Like, do you take a cruise and grab all these raw materials?
No, it can be grown. No, so basically these red macroalgae, at least, they're cultivated close to the shore.
Okay.
So if you go to the Indonesia or even China, there are vast stretches of the ocean where they're actually cultivated.
So
and mainly, there are supplies. So most of these macroalgae actually go into food applications.
Right.
Like you may not be aware that, but your toothpaste or your milkshakes, ice creams, all of them have components which are isolated or extracted from macroalgae, which go into these applications for texturizing and viscosity enhancing properties. Like, for example, there are carrageenans from red seaweeds, which are present in your toothpaste, milkshakes, canned meat, pet food. So there are multiple applications of these polymers which are present in seaweeds for food applications.
Got it. And do you receive this in powdered form, or is it raw material?
So we actually process fresh seaweed, the seaweed which comes out of the ocean. We actually have developed very proprietary technologies to process the seaweed fresh, and we extract the components from there.
Got it. So your main innovation is in processing. You receive the raw material?
So our innovation is in 2 different domains. First is we actually, when we visited these seaweed farms 10 years ago, what we understood is that most of the cultivation actually happens in shallow regions, both in Southeast Asian countries as well as in some pockets in India. That is because there are no technologies which allow people to go deep into the ocean and lay out these farms, cultivate them, and bring it back to the shore on a scalable manner.
Right.
So we have actually innovated and designed an entire combined harvester system, which can automatically seed and harvest the seaweed. And we have certain prototypes of these which are already demonstrated in Indonesia. So, like for example, if you look at the operations in India, a typical farmer can do maybe 10 by 10 square meters of seaweed farm a day, because he has to pull the raft across the shore, harvest all of it manually, and tie it back manually and push it back into the water. So imagine if you were talking about doing agricultural on land at 10 square meters per person per day. You look at the productivity, right? Yeah. And we have come a long way in land-based agriculture from what it was 10,000 years ago. We said, why don't we adapt some principles and actually develop automation-based tools to actually enhance the productivity of these people? So that was one aspect. And the other aspect was the cultivation is limited to shallow regions. So what if we are able to develop platforms on the ocean which can be used to hold the seaweed on the place? And so that involved a lot of engineering design calculations. We had to understand how these structures will stay on the ocean surface. So we have a combination of engineering design, ocean engineering, mechanical engineering, structural engineering candidates who actually work together to arrive at all these calculations and design these platforms which can hold the seaweed on the surface.
So platform is more like a greenhouse kind of thing.
No. So these seaweeds actually have to grow on the surface of the ocean,
Right.
maybe about maximum about 50 centimeters into the ocean, because that is till where the sunlight actually penetrates really well, right? So they have to be in the photic zone for the sunlight to come in for them to survive. So we need to have solutions which can hold the seaweed in that height, in that depth in the ocean. So these are like, we have actually designed specific tube net based techniques which actually can be put on the sea in long stretches.
Can you do that? Do you have to rent a place? Or
So in Indonesia, frankly, you can rent sea surface. You can pay a specific amount because the infrastructure already exists in Indonesia. People rent sea surface for growing pearls. They have the concept of renting out or leasing out sea farms.
Got it. So do you plan to have set up whatever you call that device to support?
Yes, so for us right now, we have built in one prototype of that equipment, which is already undergoing testing in Indonesia. So our vision is actually to build multiple of those prototypes to harvest large areas of sea.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So you're talking, let's say in the future, 100,000 square kilometers.
Like a farming of the future.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool. But why seaweed? What is so unique about seaweed? Is it high lipid content? Is it?
So seaweeds, especially the one species that we are working with, the group, I'll start over again. So the family of the species, seaweed species that we are actually growing is the red tropical macroalgae. So these are rich in carbohydrates, especially. Most seaweeds are rich in carbohydrates. They have very little protein or lipid content, actually. I mean, you can have specific varieties of seaweeds which are rich in protein content also. But the specific species, the Euchema and Carboficus that we cultivate are very rich in carbohydrates, and they are sulfated. So they are actually charged polysaccharides, which are very rare. Like if you look at the composition of the polysaccharides on land-based plants, it is mainly cellulose or starch, right? And they have some lignin components and probably beta-glucans in some cases. So since the charge on the polysaccharide is negative, it gives rise to some very unique and interesting properties. So the polymer actually, the polymer which is called carrageenan, comes in different levels of sulfation between different species that we work with. Some may not be sulfated at all, some may be partially sulfated, some may be excessively sulfated. So what we have done over the last 12 years is actually to understand the composition of different seaweed species and try to process it in a different way. Like, so if you have a polymer, you can either break it down, you can generate strings of different molecular weight compounds, or we can build on the existing polymer chain. You can attach different functional groups onto the polymer to create different properties, or you can leave the polymer as is and use for applications in food. So if you look at these three approaches, so we have three distinct categories of products, product categories that we are developing. So one is for agriculture and animal health applications, basically looking at how we can break down the polymer into specific molecular weight fractions and how we can use those to selectively upregulate plant growth, development, or plant immunity, or even animal immunity. And we have actually very clearly identified different properties of these compounds at different molecular weight ranges. And we have also IP on the same in that.
Plant health is one space and potentially work as a...
So there are different categories. So there are different categories in plant health also. One is called a biostimulant. So these are new categories of compounds which are being recognized all over the world, which improve and stimulate plant growth related pathways. So we are also working on understanding the mode of action in different model systems. So we apply the product, we study the effects at a molecular level, we do trials on the field scale. We've established and developed a lot of understanding on how these different molecular weight ranges can actually stimulate plant growth. So that's a very interesting piece of technology that was developed by us, and currently we are commercializing this product in India, and we've also started globally commercializing it outside India. Yeah.
And who will be your potential customer here? Farmers, government?
Yeah, it's mainly the farmers, but they would be reached through distributors, like large companies. Let's say we work with two large multinational companies, one based out of US and one is a Japanese company. We have agreements with them to target specific geographies across the world. So we've already started exporting to US, Europe.
Do you need any claim substantiation study for plant health? Like if you're claiming it as a biostimulant, do you have to run some efficacy?
Yes. So different geographies have different requirements. So for India, example, has recently launched a specific legislative act to actually recognize the process and the pathway to regulate such products. Earlier, anybody could sell biological products without substantiating any claims, and there was no way to regulate those products. So now they have defined a clear category of biostimulants under the Fertilizer Control Order Act, and all manufacturers or whoever is selling these products in the market now have to prove the efficacy and safety of the products. So the main drive behind this initiative is to actually make sure that the products which are being commercialized in the country are actually safe for final use. So they actually ask you to submit toxicity data for the products. Negative impact on either environment or on the plant. And you also are requested to provide efficacy trials for at least 3 different dosages and multiple seasons.
Do you run field trials?
Yeah, you have to run field trials.
A lot of space here to run field trials?
No, we work with a lot of institutes. So fortunately in India, they have a ICR setup, which in different parts of the country across different climatic zones. So we worked with most of them to generate data on our product. Yeah,
so you have control too.
Yeah, you have control, and you have control plus the treatment, and you actually identify what are the different time points at which you can intervene in crop cycle, and how that actually results in different phenotypes and how it impacts the plant growth finally.
Pretty cool. So this is plant health.
Yeah, in plant health, we also have another product line which is for plant defense, basically. So you might, yeah. So basically, plants have an immune system which can be triggered. So, and they can actually adapt to stresses that they encounter. So we have identified a specific molecular weight range compounds which can actually stimulate the immune pathways in the plant. So, for example, let's say when a bacterial or fungal or viral infection happens, there are specific pathways in the plant which are dependent on salicylic acid or jasmonic acid, which get triggered. And what we are observing is that when we apply our products, the same effect is actually getting replicated. Means the plant is actually getting stimulated ahead to prepare for the attack.
Like a vaccine.
Yeah, it's similar to vaccine, but we don't call it a vaccine. Yeah, but it works in a similar fashion. So we recommend the product to be applied in a prophylactic manner before the onset of disease. So it works very well in cases of certain plant viral diseases in tomato, papaya, and chili.
How do you administer this? This is through spray?
It's a foliar spray. Okay. Or we can also do root application.
Got it. Okay.
But mainly through integrated approaches. So basically, plant viral diseases are mainly transmitted through insects.
Right.
Okay, so so mainly the control right now that is already in place is only the insecticides.
Right.
But once the virus is inside the plant, controlling the insect population does not really help control the viral disease incidence. So what we propose to farmers is that you use the insect control measures. Parallelly, we also use the product to stimulate the plant immune system, so that the plant is prepared to attack the virus once it is transmitted by the insects. Right. So we do an integrated approach where we ask the farmers to use the existing control approaches, and we complement that approach by using our right. Yeah. So these are very niche areas which we are also exploring in the market. So
I'm still thinking thinking, what is the magical compound within these seaweed? So, like, do you have any claim on that? Is there
Yeah, sure.
more than one sources?
No, so what we have identified is a specific molecular weight range.
Right.
We call them sulfated galacto-oligosaccharides.
Okay.
So we actually identified the range, molecular weight range of these compounds, which can be tuned to improve plant growth, or the specific molecular weight range which can be tuned to improve plant health. So we have filed patents on those as well. So the exact composition that can actually improve or stimulate plant health.
If someone replicate that using, let's say, microbes through genetic engineering, will that be protected under your patent?
Yeah, it's a composition of matter patent. So I think it does not matter which process people use it, but once they have a certain percentage of that particular compound in their final product, it can be treated as a violation of the patent.
That's pretty cool. And are you creating your own bank or like online bank, or also the physical bank where you are capturing all of your insights or unique samples that you obtain from ocean?
We are not doing that right now because we work with several marine biology labs across Philippines and Southeast Asia. So one of my other co-founders, Mr. Nelson, actually deals with the entire ocean cultivation, marine biology aspects. Actually, I mainly look at the seaweed processing and product development.
That's pretty cool. So plant health, now animal health.
Yeah.
So how is it helping animal? Does it even have therapeutic effect?
The products are not actually curative. They work by stimulating the immune system of the animals. So we have done trials in shrimp. We've also done some preliminary trials in poultry to show that under controlled, challenged conditions with bacteria or virus, our products are able to improve the survival of shrimp. And under non-diseased conditions also, we see that the FCR, which is the feed conversion ratio, improves. And also the entire body weight gain is much better in treated shrimp versus non-treated shrimp. So it's a very interesting commercial proposition in shrimp also, where we are able to propose the addition of the product through feed, and we can actually see very good results at the end of the trial, both under challenged and non-challenged conditions. And in poultry, we are in the initial stages of testing, and we have seen some very interesting results, even again in improved FCR and body weight gain and against bacterial challenges. But we are not in a position to replace antibiotics at the moment with seaweed extract. So that needs a little more work.
Right.
But especially in shrimp, we are at a position where we are doing a lot of field tests, demonstrations right now. And we are also in the future plans to sell that product.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So is there any other application? Are you focusing on more environment or biofuel energy aspect?
Yes. So basically agri and animal health are two divisions which are like post-commercial, I mean close to, which are already commercialized or which will be commercialized in the near term. So we have two other buckets, which is food ingredients and also biomaterials and biofuel.
Food for like
Human,
processing
yeah, for processing industry. So like I mentioned, the polymer itself can be a gelling agent, and it can go into food applications. Like for your milkshakes, ice creams, it can be a thickener and viscosity enhancing agent. So we are actually developing very unique processes to reduce the water footprint, energy footprint, chemical usage that goes into manufacturing of this polysaccharide, carrageenan. And we also have clean label alternatives to carrageenan, which use very minimal processing of seaweed. So right now there's a lot of buzz about not being able to use refined ingredients, right? Everybody wants as close to the natural source as possible. So we are actually able to develop a clean label alternative for carrageenan as well, which has higher antioxidant content and which does not use the chemicals that go into carrageenan. So
that's pretty cool.
So these are two alternatives that we are working in the food ingredient space.
Right.
So even when you look at plant-based meats, I believe there's a lot of synergy that can come in by using these ingredients in plant-based meats for texturizing applications.
I see. Makes sense. And So so your focus is currently on like 4 or 5 different domains.
Right.
So as a startup founder, I always struggle what to prioritize, which market to optimize product for. How
Yeah,
do you manage so many different markets, so many different potential buyer decision makers?
Yeah, so I think for us, we've also been very conservative in the last 7 to 8 years, because we wanted to take certain products to a form and shape which can go into commercialization, so that we can focus on developing the future product lines. So a lot of focus in the R&D and the operations team has been on the agricultural biostimulant products and the plant health products till the last year. Recently we started focusing also on animal health products, so because we want to give the complete attention. When a product is out in the market, you would need support teams, you would need quality assurance, you need production. So, and also we look at what kind of products have a similar manufacturing facility, so that you don't have to go and invest in, you don't have to have additional investments to actually make that product. So in that way, I can bucket both the agricultural products and also the animal health products under one bucket, at least the initial ones. So, and although we have continuous development happening in the other animal feed products, like for poultry, and I mean, we may target cattle in future as well for.
So it looks like it's more of a platform play. Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you look at
So once you
modern-
have the active ingredient which you have patents on, I think you can develop multiple applications around it.
Right.
So you can, and that becomes like the base, like how when sugars were the platforms, people started looking at different biomaterials from sugars. So we believe this seaweed based carbohydrates become our platform technology to go into different directions. And again, the nature of the processing actually results in different applications and product lines.
Do you have a cool name for this ingredient that can be repurposed in 10 different industries eventually?
No, right now we call it the biorefinery platform.
Okay.
Yeah, seaweed biorefinery platform.
Need a good trademark, fancy name for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Moderna, it reminds me of how traditional biopharma companies do business, right? Like Moderna is focusing on mRNA. Now, with mRNA, they are solving problem in infectious therapeutic area. Like they have oncology, even during COVID time, they help with the vaccine. So in all different, I think 10 different disease indications, if not more. So with your ingredient, you're focusing on more than one industries.
Yeah.
It does make sense if it's more of a platform play, especially with a decade of hard work.
I think we have laid quite a strong foundation over the last decade, because we have secured IP in all our ocean farming technology platforms. So we have patents on the sea combine technology that I was talking about, and even the platforms that we use for cultivating seaweed. We have 2 patents filed. We have filed recently another 2 patents in the production technologies. And we have 4 to 5 patents filed again in the processing technology from seaweed to products.
Right.
So most of them will be in the composition of matter level, and some are based on processes. So our intention is, I mean, this space is also becoming very hot. Like seaweed, everybody is looking at seaweed because of carbon capture and the allied benefits that you can get. But what we are really interested in is to develop a very stable bioeconomy around it, to actually develop products which are world class, which are backed by deep science, which can reach the final customer in every domain that we operate in.
Right. Can you do all of that? You mentioned Indonesia. Can you do all of that in India as well?
Yes, it is possible, provided we have regulatory frameworks to allow such technologies to be placed on the ocean surface. So right now, as we speak, the Prime Minister has announced a scheme. Basically, the government of India has announced a scheme called Prime Minister Matsya Sampada Yojana. They have put in more than 600 crores into innovating and moving ahead the seaweed farming industry. So now, as we speak, we also interact with a lot of island-based government officials to actually take our technology into Lakshadweep, Andaman. So they want to do pilot runs of our technology in different parts of the country.
And
And I believe the target is to go to 1 million tons in the next 5 years for the program. So we certainly believe there's a lot of push from the government also to promote seaweed cultivation in India. And it will also give a lot of local livelihood opportunities.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think it's a great segue to Indian market. What are your thoughts about bioeconomy or biotech in India? Like what trends you are seeing around you? Number one. Number two, why did you choose this place, Bangalore, to grow your company?
I think Bangalore has one of the best ecosystems in terms of biotechnology. Like I think any corner of the Bangalore you go, you will see a biotechnology company. So and secondly, it has the best weather in India.
Totally.
Hands down. So
Very much like Bay Area weather.
yeah. So and especially the place where we are located at Sea Camp, it's there are 2 life sciences clusters in India, one in Bangalore and one in Delhi. So here the unique thing about this cluster is that you have University of Agricultural Sciences right outside the campus, and we have National Center for Biological Sciences, which deals with all the basic molecular biology, cell biology. You have Institute of Stem Cell Therapeutics. So it's a very vibrant ecosystem, and you can go from basic biology all the way to application. And you have very high-end analytical services that you have access to in the campus. So all you need is really good team ideas to actually translate them into great products.
Right. What advice would you give to someone who want to start a bio company today? Right. From your experience, what resources they can leverage?
So definitely the ecosystem has changed a lot in the last 10 to 12 years because when we started, the concept of incubation was a bit rare, even in the institute that we started with in IITM. But now when I go back, look at IITM Research Park or the kind of infrastructure even IIT Madras has, or the kind of infrastructure we are seeing here at CCAMP today, it's gone way ahead. I mean, there is a lot of push for startups to take up ideas. The government wants people to take risks. Like for example, the Department of Biotechnology, DBT India, they run programs to support early ideas. They give almost $100,000 with no strings attached for people to actually explore ideas for 18 months under the big scheme. They have done more than 20 different calls under the big scheme right now, supporting more than 150 entrepreneurs. So, and this is just one scheme which is in the government, but as I speak, there are several other schemes which the government does, and they're actively promoting entrepreneurship as well. And even us as C6, we got in the early first 2 years, we also got some government support for carrying out the projects that we felt were very risky at that point of time.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed in India 10 years ago. Running a startup was not really a cool thing, but now entrepreneurship suddenly it's great, right? People accept that.
I think people see that entrepreneurship comes with its own risks and rewards. So people are more amenable now to explore it, because I think there is a sense of security as well for people, that you will always find a job if you're talented. So it may not have been the case 10, 15 years ago when there was a recession and, there were a lot of other factors, right?
Makes sense. I will just ask one more question, coming back to the question I asked. What trends in biotech you are noticing around you in India? Because when I meet with companies, I see a lot of focus on ag science, a lot of focus on the service industry, but is there any trend that you are seeing in India and Bangalore particularly?
Definitely in biotechnology again spans several industries, right? You have agri even in agri, hardcore companies which are actually developing products versus people who are actually offering services to the farmers. If you look at pharma companies, people who are actually developing new molecules versus maybe developing only kits for COVID. So you have different companies who are actually present, and I mean, depending on what I see around, I definitely see a mix of all of this happening. Even in CCAM, we have companies who are inventing new antibiotics versus companies who are looking at using greenhouse gases for turning it into animal feed. So you have different spectrum of companies. I can say that definitely a lot of push in medical diagnostics, which is happening. Then ag, again, in ag science also, a lot of emphasis is going on marketplace access, because I think that's been one key area where people are not able to access good products, right? So there are a lot of companies which are in the marketplace development also. I think one of the most exciting things for us from seaweeds is actually being able to find replacements for single-use plastics. Like, for example, you're aware that currently the plastic usage is in a very high level, and people are looking at alternatives to replace plastics. So for us, the main focus has been to look at modifications of the seaweed-based polymers in a very green and sustainable manner to actually result in products that can replace single-use plastics in the long run. So this is completely in research and development stage right now, but we hope in the next 2 to 3 years we'll actually have products and technologies that can come in there.
So application is in plant health, animal health, more human food ingredients. Then you have
industrial chemicals,
bioplastics.
And then finally, our vision is to be able to reach the cost of seaweed by automating the whole cultivation platforms and reach a point where we can actually make biofuel commercially viable.
Right.
I think that's the whole vision of the organization, that we are able to utilize and develop products right now at the current cost of seaweed. We're able to develop products in a certain buckets and we're able to commercialize. But for certain products like bioplastics and biofuels, we need to set the cost of seaweed to a certain benchmark, which we believe will happen in the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. What do you see as the future of Sea6 Energy, like at 10 years, 20 years? What impact you strive to make?
See, definitely a lot of solutions that we are developing are carbon neutral and will contribute to sustainability. For example, even in the agri biostimulants, every liter of the product that we use creates more biomass, which means more carbon dioxide uptake from the atmosphere. So indirectly, we are contributing to carbon neutral, carbon positive kind of environment. Yeah.
Most governments have goals like by 2030, 2050, they want to reduce their carbon footprint by some percentage. So, final question. Any advice for aspiring bio entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think definitely for bio entrepreneurs, they need to be aware of the long life cycles of product development for hardcore bio deep science based startups. Yeah, it's a long-term thing. I would really suggest that they look for a really good team, close-knit team who can actually go through all the ups and downs. Be in a facility where you can explore your ideas without any limitations, and definitely watch out for funding because that's one thing which drives the entire innovation and holds it all together.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's very inspiring what you're doing. We need more bio entrepreneurs like you in India, all over the world. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
These are the platform technologies that I was talking about, ocean cultivation platforms. So this is the sea combine that we have developed with the machinery on it. It actually processes seaweed, harvests it and seeds it simultaneously. And these are tube nets that actually shot taken aerially from the farms as well. So basically, like I explained, the seaweed cultivation is very labor intensive.
Right.
So we really wanted to mechanize and lower the cost of the biomass. And the main products, like I was mentioning, was agri inputs, food and feed, and biomaterials. And these are some examples of the products that we have in terms of different agricultural portfolio products. Then we have products in shrimp, health, and products for semi-refined carrageenan, seaweed powders, which are for human food.
Right.
And lastly, we have products which are like in development stage, which is the biocrude. And we also have made some seaweed sheets and fillers, which can be used in future for renewable plastics.
It's impressive.
This is a portfolio of products that we are currently working on developing.
It's pretty cool. And your lab space?
Yeah, so we have about half of first floor.
Got it. Okay.
Is your wife? So different disciplines like between agriculture, animal health, chemistry. So we have different sets of people who actually
Right.
work here.
What skill set do you need in the lab?
Usually we have biotechnology, like biochemistry background,
Right.
or plant health,
Plant health. Okay.
or if people have experience in DNA analysis, like Danish shrimp cultures experience.
I see. You are not doing any more bio work here.
Yeah, we do a lot of small bio work also, because when we want to understand how the products are working in plants or animal tissues,
Right.
we actually need to harvest the tissue and do a gene expression analysis.
I see. Okay.
So we really do a lot of molecular analysis work here. So,
That's pretty cool.
and we have organic chemists who work on green chemistry modifications of seed polypers.
Right. Right.
All of that brings in very different perspectives, the whole product thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
This video is sponsored by SciSpot, the best tech stack for modern biotech.